You may remember that the day after Barrack was arrested, CNN reported that the federal prosecutors who brought these 7 felony charges against Barrack, for some reason, according to CNN, prosecutors sat on those charges for a very long time before this week's indictment finally went ahead. According to CNN's reporting, the prosecutors had enough evidence to bring charges against Tom Barrack last year, but they held off until Trump was out of office and a new administration was in place. Quote, 2 sources tell CNN the U.S. attorney in Brooklyn at the time, Richard Donoghue, expressed misgivings about the case. It's unclear if he delayed the case outright or if prosecutors chose not to move forward at the time, knowing the U.S. attorney, Mr. Donoghue, would not support it. Mr. Donoghue, of course, was then subsequently promoted by then Attorney General Bill Barr to a top job at the Justice Department. Job well done. How do we reward this guy? Only after Trump was gone and a new president took over and the Trump appointees were out of these leadership roles, only then could the case against Tom Barrack go ahead. What is that all about? And, I mean, it's interesting about the prosecution of Tom Barrack, but it's worrying about the U.S. Justice Department. I mean, was that a favor to the former president? Was that a political favor to the former president being done by law enforcement officials? If the Justice Department has been used in that way, doesn't that have to be fixed or at least ferreted out? Shouldn't there be some accountability for that? 2 Democratic members of Congress are asking exactly that question today. And I think this is provocative and interesting. It's Democratic Congressman Ted Lieu of California and Congresswoman Kathleen Rice of New York. And the 2 of them have just written to the Inspector General at the U.S. Justice Department asking for an investigation. They say, quote, as former prosecutors, we're concerned about reporting that suggests federal prosecutors had enough evidence to indict Mr. Barrack well before 2021, but were discouraged from doing so. As members of Congress, we request that you conduct an investigation into whether Barrack or any other friends of the former president were given special treatment by the U.S. Justice Department during the last administration, and whether Barrack's case was inappropriately suppressed. I mean, it is one thing to have this actually quite scandalous reporting about the Barrack case, right? There's serious national security implications of this foreign agent prosecution being delayed for more than a year. This is a serious case about another country having high-placed agents inside and adjacent to the U.S. government in a way that is affecting U.S. policy in a surreptitious way, right? That's a serious national security matter in its own right, to delay the prosecution and essentially allow that scheme to continue for a year while you try not to offend anybody by bringing the case. Like, that's a serious thing. But these members of Congress, I think, are right to look beyond just this one case. I mean, there is a pattern here that kind of keeps me up at night, if I'm honest. I mean, the New York Times reported earlier this year that Trump's Justice Department blocked federal prosecutors in New York from moving ahead with an investigation of Trump lawyer Rudy Giuliani. Trump's Justice Department overruled line prosecutors in their own department to recommend a much lighter sentence for Trump friend Roger Stone, who was convicted of obstructing Congress and witness tampering. Trump's Justice Department dropped its case against Trump National Security Advisor Mike Flynn, despite Flynn having pled guilty twice to lying to the FBI. And, you know, don't forget, we're just talking about this just this week. Not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5 different Trump cabinet secretaries were referred to the Justice Department for potential federal criminal prosecution while Trump was in office. And in all 5 cases, in the case of all 5 of those cabinet secretaries, Trump's Justice Department said, nah, it seems fine, we'll pass. I mean, that's just like off the top of my head. That's just a handful of the cases where the Trump Justice Department appeared to intervene in or shut down cases involving Trump's friends and allies. Those are just the ones that, that's not even all the ones we know about. That's literally the ones I can just riff on. How many cases were slow-walked or delayed or quashed, right? Are we going to learn about those? How many cases were shut down, not prosecuted at all? How many were slowed down like Barrack's? Are we ever going to learn about those? You know what? To be honest, though, there is one silver lining to the as yet unexplained delay in actually bringing the charges against Tom Barrack. And it is actually illustrated by the final chapter in the junk bond king Michael Milken story. So Michael Milken pled guilty. He paid all that money. He did serve time in federal prison. But then just last year, 2020, Michael Milken got a presidential pardon from Donald Trump. Trump pardoned Michael Milken for those massive, massive financial crimes decades ago. The White House actually put out a list of all the rich people and Trump donors who had advocated for Milken's pardon, including, wouldn't you know, Tom Barrack. And on his way out the door, Trump, of course, pardoned pretty much all his friends and allies and supporters who had been charged with anything during his presidency. He pardoned Mike Flynn and Steve Bannon and Paul Manafort and Roger Stone, right down to George Papadopoulos and Alex van der Zwaan from the Russia investigation. The list goes on and on and on, but he only pardoned people who were charged or convicted while he was president. Tom Barrack's case got delayed, right? So he's out of luck. No presidential pardon coming for him. His indictment came after Trump was out of office, which itself is probably a scandal if the indictment couldn't be brought while Trump was in office because Trump appointees wouldn't let it happen. But the fact that it was delayed means that he doesn't get out of jail free with a pardon card from Trump.